Hey everyone, this is Max here. Just popping in real quick to let y'all know that we are unlocking a chunk of our recent bonus episode with our friends and comrades Aaron and Shawn from the Srsly Wrong podcast, and we are posting it here on the public feed for all of you. We are doing this to celebrate and to spread the word about the launch of Aaron and Shawn's animated series Papa and Boy, which is now streaming on the worker-owned socialist streaming service Means TV. If you guys aren't already subscribed to Means TV, you should definitely check them out. It's like HBO Go for leftists and left-curious types, filled with, just so many great documentaries and comedy shows, special series, and the excellent Means Morning News, hosted by friend of the show, Sam Sachs, a.k.a. the Walter Cronkite of the left. If you guys are tired of crappy corporate media morning news shows, you should definitely get Means Morning News into your diet. So, they've got a lot of great stuff over at Means TV, and, the more subscribers they get, the more that they can support original, fun, thoughtful programming like Papa and Boy. And if you are considering subscribing to Means, but, you want to take a look at more of their stuff first, then we've got good news for you. I am happy to report that the first episode of Papa and Boy is actually publicly available on the Means TV YouTube channel, which we have linked to in the show notes for this episode. And if you want to listen to our full conversation with Aaron and Shawn, as well as all the other great bonus episodes that we've published over the years, just head on over to patreon.com/workingpeople. That's patreon.com/workingpeople, and become a subscriber for just $5 a month. So, support Aaron and Shawn, support Means TV, support our show if you aren't already, and enjoy this unlocked segment from our recent bonus episode where I got to talk with Aaron and Shawn about their new animated series, the whole concept behind Papa and Boy, and why bosses love talking about workers like we're children. Well, let's talk about that. So, we obviously don't want to give the whole storyline away, but I guess for folks who are maybe just hearing about it now, what can they expect from this series? How are you guys pitching this series? Like, give me the picture this kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's a universe that's inhabited entirely by papas and boys, and there's a inherent political tension between them that extends deep into history. But the show is primarily about one particular papa and one particular boy, as that papa, who means well and means the best, but is part of a system that is larger than himself, is doing what he can to try to prepare his boy to be part of this world that to us as viewers shouldn't make sense, because it's such an absurd mirror, funhouse mirror parody of our world. So at the heart of the show is a relationship between a father and a son trying to navigate a world that's not made for either of them, but is especially made not for boys. And from that, I like to think that each episode expands and grows on the territory the episode before it introduces, and that each episode brings a new sort of like holy shit or what the fuck kind of moment. But it expands from the first episode is about a father trying to tell his son who's watching television to go take a bath. Like that's the plot. And from that, we go in some interesting directions. And they also have what's called in this universe the father-son system, which is a way of relating to boys that is supposed to make them compliant, docile, obedient subjects. And they also live under a system which is called the father-son system as well, which is a socioeconomic system, which is about fathers ruling over boys. So that's the elevator pitch for the show that would get rejected anywhere but Means, but it means they got it, and they we made it. We have 5 episodes to show based on that.
What was the funnest one that you guys did? What was the one where you had the most fun doing?
That's hard to say.
I think
there's really fun moments I can pick out from all of them, but I feel like they escalate, but our hope is that by the time you get to the 5th one, that you are feeling like your mind was blown by what's happened.
Yeah. It'd probably be between, in terms of production, the intersection between production and how much I love the episode, then I think the winner for me is episode 4, because it was really early in our production process, and it was all magical and fun when I was making it then, whereas episode 5 was near the end of the process, so I had a little bit more of the weathered face animator who's approaching the summit kind of thing.
But we also asked a lot from you for the 5th episode in terms of animation. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, so as every episode is great. Episode 4 is maybe my favorite. Episode 5 would maybe be second, but then also, I don't know, you can't sleep on episodes 1, 2, and 3.
There's some stuff in episode 3 that I think was one of my favorite things to record. We liked it so much that we initially recorded it for a different episode and then imported it into this new version of episode 3 we created, because we were like, okay, yeah, we'll scrap that idea, but this section we have to keep. Like, that's going in whatever we replace this with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it was episode 3 for me. This is Eat Your Vegetables. That it felt like the podcast and the animated show kind of like fully merging in a way that like I personally thought was hilarious. Like even just like in dumb little like jokes where it's kids like sitting down at the table and the papa's like, it's like, oh, this is a family recipe, stinky vegetables made extra gross. Oh, so dumb. but yeah, it's like little, just kind of like throwaway lines that you guys pepper throughout your, your skits that really made me laugh. But, I think like, we were talking about this earlier in the recording, right? How, there really are some kind of, you almost have to push to the outer limits of ridiculousness to see, in fact, how ridiculous some of the really serious kind of issues that we grapple with on a day-to-day basis actually are, right? So, like we said, like, this show is kind of setting up people to question like the nature of hierarchy and authority, right? And the sort of automatic acceptance and acquiescence to that authority, right? Which like, again, that's a heavy topic. It's a topic that philosophers from Foucault to Nietzsche to whoever have been kind of like writing about for many, many centuries, but like you guys kind of crystallize it in this sort of fantastical illustrated world in the question of like, well, why do I as a boy have to do X thing? Like, why do I have to take a bath? Why do I have to eat my vegetables? And the inevitable answer is because I said so, right?
Yeah.
so talk to me more about that.
Yeah, I think that one of the really deep comedy veins that we struck, not just in the Papa and Boy universe, but in our sketch worlds in general, is the arrogance of people in power, the arrogance of people who are immersed in oppressive systems where they are the ones benefiting from it. and they're kind of like default not understanding the ways that what you're doing is affecting other people, or these deeply held beliefs that this hierarchy is natural, that you do have to listen to me, and that there's like, I don't have to explain it to you. It's just, you're my child. You listen to me. There's things like that for all different types of hierarchical oppressive systems in our society, that making fun of the arrogant ways that people in power justify their power to themselves can be very funny in a lot of different situations. And I think that, yeah, it's a comedy vein that we mine quite frequently that really works well in the adult-child relationship type world we've created here.
Yeah, in unequal power relationships, and I think I got this insight from Graeber, who was quoting someone else, and I can't remember where it comes from originally, but it came to me through Graeber. It was like in power relationships, the powerful person does not have to have a theory of mind of their subjects. They don't have to imagine. The boss doesn't need to imagine how the workers think, because they have the threat of authority, the threat of punishment over them. But the workers, or any person who's in the under relationship of a hierarchical command and control relationship, the people who are on the disadvantaged side, in order to survive, they need to have a complex theory of mind of their so-called superiors, and that is a really, it's a rich mine for comedy, but it's also, I think, inherently tied to comedy, because often comedy is about trying to look for sort of bisections or intersections of multiple different ways of seeing something. Like the example that a friend of ours, Adam Krauss, wrote this great book called The Revolution Will Be Hilarious. And he gives the example of the old Marx Brothers joke, I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got into my pajamas, I'll never know. So what that is doing is, there's two different meanings for shooting an elephant in your pajamas, and seeing that intersection is where comedy comes from. So there's this sort of inherent connection, I think, between the way that people who are oppressed or downtrodden or receive, who are dominated over by, bosses, leaders, etc. They have to see the world in multiple ways to survive. And the intersections between those multiple ways of seeing is a really, really, is sort of one of the inherent building blocks of good comedy. So and for this reason, I believe that it's very hard to be a powerful person who's also funny.
Yeah, it's also why I think a lot of right-wing comedy isn't funny, because it is just justifying hierarchical systems and doesn't have a good theory of mind of the people it's making fun of. Like, it's funny to other papas when they're making fun of boys, but if you have the perspective of both, it becomes no longer funny anymore.
So it's very enjoyable for us to use the papa as a catch-all, the papa-boy dynamic as a catch-all hierarchical dynamic, because there's so many rich intersections in that exact way of different things that things can mean in any given context. And we often found that there were more parallels than we intended, that there's just something, another thing that we figured out on our show early on, and this won't blow the mind of anyone who does comedy, I'm pretty sure. I've never read it in a comedy book or whatever. But I remember when we figured this out, when we were like, this is really funny for some reason. It's like one person saying something outrageous and foolish is kind of funny, but a second person agreeing with them just brings it to another level. And like, that's the Fatherson system is a system where all the adults, all the papas in the entire world are in total agreement of the most ridiculous shit that you've ever heard in your life. And they sound a lot like the authorities of our society.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like this, and I think that that's one of the, really kind of telling things that you get from this allegory, right? That really struck me watching the animated series. Right, because as I think you guys mentioned at the very top, right, like this very much applies to situations that all of us will know intimately, and so my mind naturally goes to the workplace, and I think about so many times when, as a young worker, like at a high school, right? You're green, you're kind of learning the ropes, and you're kind of indoctrinated into, accepting and believing that you still have a lot to learn. That's why you're at the bottom of the rung. And you climb up that ladder by developing better skills, by working harder, by getting an education, yada, 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 right? You put power on a pedestal. And then, just the experience of working with other people, and you inevitably find out, you're like, oh, well, my manager's a dumbass, right? Like that person is not smarter than me at all, or I work harder than that person. Like you almost, start to like, it's a trial by fire, right? You start to kind of learn just by doing the work that in fact, like maybe this hierarchical structure isn't a meritocracy. Maybe there's actually a more arbitrary and even bad sort of reason that this hierarchy exists. And I think of that as like someone who, I still remember when I was like being groomed to be a manager at a warehouse I worked at. And I won't go into it because it's actually a really like shitty and awful story. And I don't want to bring the mood down, but it was just like, it was very revealing for me to like be on that side, even just for a minute, right? To hear the way that the other managers talked about, the workers on the warehouse floor. And I was like, you guys know that I'm still technically one of them, right? But then they try to make you feel like you're special, like you're not one of them. And that's why you're standing over here with us and you're not over there with those cattle, like who don't understand what we're telling you. And it just like the comedy that you're talking about of, people, papas like sort of like all agreeing with each other and getting sucked into this mass psychosis to the point that none of them is able or willing to even step outside of themselves and say like, wait, this is kind of ridiculous, right? Like that's very much how, hierarchy in our existing capitalist system works, right? Everyone wants to be in those positions of power, and part of the price of the ticket, right, is ignoring the arbitrariness of that power, right? And ignoring the fact that it's not a sense of like deservingness, an earned power. Like really, like you earn that power by being willing to wield it. Right. That's the thing that I ultimately realized working in restaurants and warehouses was I was like, the people in positions of power, the managers especially, the middle managers, not the people in the front office, like they are there not because they're smarter than me, not because they work harder than me, but because they are good stewards of power. Right. They have no qualms about firing people, of telling people to work late, they can look at you with a straight face while telling you that you're not going to get your tip payout today because there's no cash in the register. Like that takes a different kind of class of person or a different type of psychology. And that's the kind of thing that you guys are trying to kind of ridicule in this show, right?
Definitely. Yeah. Something that sticks out from what you said, Max, is that part of the price of admission for hierarchical society is like not acknowledging what's going on. That like there's this sort of, no one says, oh, you have to never mention X, Y, or Z in order to move up in this company. But the people who are good at managing power notice, oh, people who mention X, Y, and Z don't move ahead. People who don't mention X, Y, and Z do move ahead. So there's this kind of like, people are implicitly in the context of a workplace paid off, but in other contexts paid off through social capital or through the kinds and types of attention that they get by not acknowledging these elephants in the room when they come up. And yet that sort of stuff is really fascinating to us and trickles into the series, even when we're thinking about vegetables.
Yeah, I think power relationships like that, command and control relationships like boss-worker relationships, the people who are in power have to justify to themselves that they deserve it. And so like part of getting into those positions is to already buy into the system that exists as being right, being just. You just have to play the game to move up within the system. So that you have to, before you get accepted as the supervisor, the manager, the whatever, show your willingness to work within that system, to do those things, to give the minimum amount of buy-in to say like, yes, I think this is right, and not just right, I think I'm willing to play this role because the system is telling me that I'm a good person if I do that, or I'm a productive person, I'm worthy of a promotion. The ways that you get rewarded with tokens, with money, with what you need to live, you get those rewards if you're willing to do those things and to be that type of person, to buy into that ideology, to move up these hierarchies. So it naturally self-selects for people who are willing to get ideologically on board with some of these really silly assumptions that like people aren't fundamentally equal. We shouldn't all decide how our workplaces run together. No, a small group of the really smart people are the best, the cream of the crop. They should be the ones running things. Even though we, say we live in a democratic society and everyone should have an equal say in running things, when you get in the workplace, that logic goes out the window, and all of a sudden it's this extremely hierarchical logic that there are certain people who should be invested with the power to command other people around. And it's just, you have to accept that that's good and right in order to move up.
Because one day you'll get to command and punish as long as you keep your nose down.
Well, and it's like abandoning yourself to it too, right? I mean, I think like that was another epiphany that I had, because I remember I think asking my brother Zach this one time when I walked into like the office that he worked at, and I kind of asked him bluntly, I was like, does everyone here buy this shit? And he knew what I was talking about. I was like, like it feels like everyone's putting on a performance, but afterwards they're all going to go home and talk about like, oh, well, that was so dumb, right? But this is what I've got to do just to, kind of get through the day at this job. And he's like, no, they believe it. Right? Like, there's like that's the I guess the comedy or the comedic element of ideology, right? Ideology has its greatest hold on us when we don't see it as ideology, when we just see it as the natural order of things, right? Ideology is always what the other guy has. And like America makes this point like on a weekly basis, and it never ceases to crack me up, where like the most American of American things could happen, even in like fucking horrifying registers, right? Like elementary school getting shot up while like militarized police just sit like with their hands in their fucking pockets for hours on end, right? Like something so horrifyingly and like uniquely American could happen. And people will be online and on the news being like, what is this? Like, communist Russia, right? Or what is this? Like, Sharia law? It's like, no, motherfucker, it's us. Like, we're the ones doing this.
Picture of a homeless camp. Look at this. It's like Cuba.
Yeah. Like, oh, what are we Cuban? It's just like there's something really telling there that is almost sad. If it would be really sad if it wasn't so fucking comical, but it speaks to like what we're talking about here, right? Like there's almost at a certain point a level of conditioning that makes so many people fundamentally incapable of actually recognizing the hold that arbitrary ideological justifications of hierarchy and different power arrangements have on them. They just accept them as natural, and in fact they even like celebrate them. I mean, Jesus, we're having this conversation a week after like probably like the greatest display of unthinking, love of hierarchy imaginable, when the entire fucking Western world was like doing nonstop coverage of the death of the Queen of England.
Oh yeah, we're Commonwealthers. We're from Canada. She's on our money. And
yeah, so we had an official day of mourning last week. This week, this week.
The government told us take the day off to mourn.
Yeah, no, because I grew up always hearing, oh, the queen, just ceremonial power. We don't really take it seriously anymore. And like, she's kind of always been in the background of my world living in a Commonwealth country. But like, yeah, seeing the way people reacted and like just the getting on people's case for the minorest amount of disrespect in these moments. Like, it is a random thing, but I was in a Facebook group for a TV show where someone had posted this thread suggesting that we shut down the group for a few days for everyone to just mourn the queen afterwards. And I was like, I was like trying not to get into like arguments about this, but just feeling like really kind of like offended by that. I'm like, I don't think we should be doing this. I don't think we have to pay that much respect to this old lady who was the leader of a colonial country for like 70 years. Just no, like, I think this is a bad idea.
Yeah, I remember as a kid being at school and seeing, this is a Canadian experience, seeing a portrait of the Queen on the wall, and underneath it said Queen Elizabeth, the Queen of Canada. And that was the moment that I learned that there was a Queen of Canada, one, and that two, it was her. And I remember this feeling of like, why do we have a queen? Like, this is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, and then they're like, oh, don't worry, she has no power.
Yeah,
she has no power. But you're like, okay, well then why do we have her?
We just put her on
right, then why are we doing any of this?
But Max, you mentioned something that I think is really, really fundamental to Papa and Boy, and I want to go back to it because it really resonated with me when you were talking, and I think there's a lot of connections here. The way that the workplace, or the way that ideology and the workplace alienate people from themselves, where you have to lose part of yourself to participate in a system, participate in a structure. That to me is the core question of Papa and Boy. The place, the nucleus that all the comedy is rotating around, consciously or unconsciously. This is a system that is making people lose themselves for the purposes of this greater good, this bigger system. And I think that it applies really profoundly, not just in ideology where we lose ourselves to the currents of our society, or the workplace where we have to pretend that we think things aren't bullshit, that we actually do think are bullshit, or worse still, start to believe they're not bullshit in order to cope. But also, really in particular, it's something that we do to children in society. Children, I think right now, are in a very unique, tragic position of they're inheriting this world that's out of control, that the future of the world is uncertain, and we're expecting children to pick it up for us. We're going to call them inspiring and not give them the tools to fix it. But in particular, like, childhood is a time when our individuality is developing. We're starting to become who we might be. And through school, through parenting styles, through the ideology of society, kids are kind of chipped away at. They're who they would be, and who, and this isn't kids, this is people, this is us. Who we are and who we could be is chipped away at when we're children. And we become something that isn't the fullest expression of ourselves, because the society treats adults as having unlimited authority over children, the ability to punish them, the ability to fit them into the context that we want. And it's a really tragic thing that I think is most fundamentally tragic when it applies to children, because when it applies to children, it applies to all of us, because we all once were children, but also really profoundly applies to the workplace or other contexts where people have to abridge themselves to be part of something. And I think abridging themselves to be part of something is one of the, if not the, themes of the Papa and Boy universe.
So this is normally where the point in the recording where I would say, boom, like I'd let that hang and I would end the recording. I always like to let interviewees have the last word, but I'm gonna scuttle that for a second just so I can ask you guys to let folks know how they can watch it, and to also, again, congratulate you guys on all the hard work that is finally coming to life, and people are finally going to see it. So we love you guys. We're proud of you guys. Tell everyone how they can watch Papa and Boy, and we'll close out.
Well, thank you. That it means a lot to hear that, even just after this after this time. Like it's really, really nice. And it brightens my day to hear that you liked episode 3 in particular, because it's specific. It's specific feedback about this thing. So yeah, if you want to see Papa and Boy, the first 2 episodes are coming out on September 26th on Means TV, which is a worker-owned streaming services. We're both shareholders in Means TV, which means that if and when it generates profit, we get a piece of that as workers. Great leftist content, great documentaries. They recently added one about Ursula Le Guin, for example. So you can sign up at, I think it's means.tv. The suggested price is $10 a month, but it's also pay what you can. You can email them and no questions asked. They'll hook you up at a more affordable rate based on people's needs. But I would also say maybe if you can, give the whole thing, because it helps us finance more stuff like Papa and Boy, potentially doing more Papa and Boy in the future is something we'd love to do. And it's something that you can stream on your smartphone, your computer, laptop. You can cast it to your smart TVs, all that sort of great streaming service stuff that you're used to, except it's entirely full of content which is worker owned and operated with a strong left-wing bent. So cancel something else, cancel one of the other dozens of streaming services that only exist to trap us all in some sort of nightmare world, and subscribe to Means TV instead. It will help us out a lot, and it's good shit.
And you can just torrent the stuff on the other streaming services. I don't know. No, maybe. I don't know if that's a good suggestion. But.
See, being a content creator, this is a hierarchy moment, because as a content creator, you're not supposed to acknowledge the stealing of content. It's like all content creators, in order to, like, if we wanted to get a Netflix show, we could never, ever say that, right? Like, acknowledge that torrents exist. They're good. You probably can mostly get away with it. Like, that's how you move up in the streaming world. Pretend. Anyways, please subscribe to Means TV for money, because we spend a lot of time and effort on this, and we think that you'll really be glad you did.